Pokemon has added quite a few different mechanics over the years, but my favorite has always been abilities, which were introduced in the 3rd generation and further expanded upon in the 5th. See, on top of the regular type matchups and the physical special attack split, abilities applied an additional rule to the arena, where each Pokemon will bring their own ability to change up the game. Most Pokemon have at most 3 abilities to choose from, but this mechanic gave each species a gameplay-based characteristic and reinforced the uniqueness of each design. You can call me Nordis, and I've been working on Stemma, my collection of stem-based creatures that I'm trying to make a game out of one day. And today, I'll talk about my tweet that kinda started a trend as I revealed the Stemma design that actually gave me this idea in the first place. Stick around till the end, where I'll show off some amazing art by people who participated in the topic of today's video, ability forms. What if abilities changed the appearance of a Pokemon? That was the tweet I made. I mean, each of these abilities have a name and they have a distinct effect in the game. Why not use those elements as inspiration to make some designs? My first example was Breloom, who has Effect Spore, Poison Heal, and Technician. For Effect Spore, I made a little veil coming out of their mushroom cap and had more of a taller cone motif to spray their spores when disturbed. Poison Heal was rounder with patterns to elicit a sculpt as they heal off of being poisoned. And lastly, Technician has sharp shapes as they're locked in to throw some mean mock punches. I would then make more ability forms for Ribombee with Honeygather referencing pollen collecting on bees and bee flies, Shield Dust having larger wings as that's where the dust is from, and Sweet Veil, where since I already gave Breloom a veil, I tried to give the ribbon portion more of a flowy look. And lastly, I made forms of Gallade, where Steadfast had a stronger frame to withstand flinches. By the way, I find it ridiculous how Steadfast increases speed upon flinches but doesn't protect the Pokemon from flinching. Like please, flinching via Fake Out is very prevalent and competitive, and there are better abilities to discourage Fake Out. But I don't care, as Generation 9 gave Gallade sharpness, where I made the design kind of, sharp. Lastly, Justified has the star motif in their silhouette as they take on a very prideful stance. Contrary to some comments, my initial idea wasn't to make one of the abilities actually be the canon design, because my intentions were that between the slight color and proportional changes I made, the canon design was just supposed to be the average of these variations. Like how Klefki in the game has the same set of keys, but in universe, Klefkis can have any assortment of keys. The one we see in the game was just a representation of the average Klefki. Now speaking of in-game, do I expect ability forms to be added in Pokemon mainline games? I don't, but not necessarily for competitive reasons. See, since most Pokemon can have up to 3 possible abilities to choose from, there's a chance to pull off some mind game shenanigans to trick out your opponent. However, many abilities, not all, but many, do announce immediately which ability they are. And even when they don't, you can sometimes deduce which ability they actually have just by process of elimination. On top of this, many species have one specific choice that's much more competitively popular than the other choices. And furthermore, the latest generation of competitive games have an open team format where you get to read your opponent's set before starting your first match. This reduces not only the guessing game, but also allows for more calculated plays instead of hoping that you guessed right. So competitively, I think ability forms aren't the biggest deal breaker. However, I don't expect this concept in the games because of the art that's required. If there were ability forms for each Pokemon, it would require so much more space for new models, sprites, and animations, as if the Switch needed to be even more overworked. So yeah, this concept honestly wasn't made for the Pokemon games, but I did imagine it to be possible in something like the anime. Now, while this idea wasn't made for the Pokemon games, it was kinda made for my own game. See, in Stemma, there was this one line that I always wanted to redo. there were a family that represented photoreceptors, which are cells in your eye that can detect light. When it comes to photoreceptors, there are rods and cones. Rods are better at detecting light when it's dim, as cone cells can detect color as they're used more in bright conditions. Where most people have 3 different kinds of cone cells: long, medium, and short, which roughly detect red, green, and blue light respectively. Color blindness is caused by the lack of any of these cone types, and these cones are why red, green, and blue are considered to be the primary colors of light to us. I discussed more of that in a previous video. So here's a redrawn Rhodopto named after rhodopsin, which is the protein rods use to detect light. Apparently rhodopsin appears purple, but that means they absorb greens and blues better. While rods don't grow into cones in real life, I like to evolve concepts as a stemma morphs into another, so Rhodopto was able to grow into chromatos, who represent cones. But back then, I simply made the different forms just recolors of each other. It was just a cosmetic gimmick. However, I was thinking, what if I differentiated these forms? What if they had their own attribute? But why stop there? If we're going to separate forms anyways, why not make their attributes influence their design? So this is the single stemma line I plan to have with the attribute form gimmick. Now this whole concept was also reinforced with the stemma's real life counterpart, the mantis shrimp. Beautiful and powerful carnivores of the sea who have 12 to 6 different cone cells as opposed to our 3. Despite this, I am not going to make 16 different variations. Besides, some papers say that only a few of the cone cells are used for color detection and that the others are for detecting polarized light. The research is ongoing. Alright, so their special eyes made me choose the mantis shrimp to represent photoreceptors. But it was their claws that pushed me into making separate attribute forms. You might have heard that the mantis shrimp have one of the strongest punches out there, as their spring-loaded smashers can bash in any prey's armor. However, some mantis shrimp use their claws like spears to pierce fish instead. Okay, but that's 2 forms. I need 3 to cover R, G, and B. So it turns out there's a few species of mantis shrimp that have developed hatchets or a more intermediate shape between these smashers and spears. So, tying in the long, medium, and short cone cells, here is Chromato's long form. It was odd to think that the piercing spear would represent the less piercing red light, so I imagined that this design preferred to slash with their arms instead. Now for the short form, blue light does penetrate more due to their shorter wavelength, which also means there's a higher frequency in the light. Since mantis shrimp with smashing arms generally have more power, I thought they matched. And lastly, the medium cone cell is now the median between these forms. Each of these attributes and morphing requirements are due to change, by the way. It will be a long time until I code these in. Heck, I haven't even finished drawing the lineless version of them yet, which is a style I plan to use for my game. To close out today's video, here's a montage of various artists who made their own ability forms. Now, down in the description, I'll have a Google Sheet with each of the artists' link, so remember to check them out and give them the love they deserve. I also implore you to check out #AbilityForms on Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, and other sites, as there are even more artists whose works I wasn't able to include here today. See, before I made this video, I asked for permission on Twitter and Tumblr, hence most of the tags here are from those 2 sites specifically. But yeah, there are plenty more ability forms on other social media. So, since this montage is going to take some time, allow me to clarify something. Even though I just spent this video talking about my initial intentions behind ability forms, do I care if someone had a slightly different interpretation? No. Heck, today I said that the canon design wasn't supposed to be one of the forms, but do I care if somebody actually did? No. I'm not here with a rubric to give out grades or anything. If you use this concept to have some fun, you won. Because at the end of the day, I just thought ability forms were a fun design exercise, a concept to get the creative juices rolling, as we find inspiration not just from culture and real life species, but also from game mechanics. There's inspiration everywhere! And a lot too, judging by all these art pieces. You don't need me to tell you this, but fun is intrinsically valuable in having a quality life. And no matter what others say, intrinsic value is still very valuable, especially for you. I am elated to see so many people coming together to have their own spin on this idea, and I just hope you had fun with it. So yeah, once again, if you like any of these wonderful art pieces made by the people here, please check out their socials in the Google Sheet below to like and follow them. I now want to thank my Patreon members for directly supporting the channel and my Stemma project, but if you're interested in hearing more about my works, you can subscribe to the channel for free. So, thank you for watching the video, and I hope you can find some time out of your day to enjoy creativity.